We'll start with the cost of living crisis. We've been speaking to a number of people who are struggling to make ends meet, relying more and more on community services. The survey we did this week showed that the main concerns are food, fuel and energy costs. So first of all, just tell us what the Scottish Government is doing to help those people cope with the rising costs.
In summary, the Scottish Government is spending this year around £3 billion in total on a range of different interventions to try to help people with the cost of living. Some of those are temporary measures, help through council tax bills, for example, that came earlier in the year. And some of that, much of that actually, is trying to permanently put more money into the pockets of those at the bottom end of the income scale. So for example, and it is just one example, the new Scottish Child Payment, which is giving the lowest income families with children money every week. We've doubled that, of course, from £10 to £20 a week. So there's a range of support that the Scottish Government is providing, and we have an obligation to ensure that we are keeping that under review and continuing to do as much as possible. We also have an obligation, in fairness to people across the country though, to be very clear that many of the key levers here and access to most resources lie with the UK Government. Whether we're talking about regulation of the energy market, VAT on fuel, the macroeconomic levers that help to influence the rate of inflation, these are levers that lie with the UK Government. So too does the access to the borrowing powers that determine how much governments have to invest here. So it's important that I continue to ensure the Scottish Government is doing as much as possible, but that we also make sure that there is pressure on the UK Government to step up and do much more too.
On the things that you can do and you do have the powers over, though, that the survey that we did showed that 2/3 of those who were asked feel the Scottish Government isn't doing enough, and unions have actually said that the Scottish Government is making a deliberate choice not to intervene in some areas. So is there more that you could do?
Well, firstly, let me just say categorically that it is downright wrong to say that we're making any kind of deliberate choice not to intervene and help. Why would we choose to do that? It would make no sense whatsoever, and it would be completely wrong and misguided. So that is not true in any way, shape or form. Now, to go directly to points that trade unions will make, we're also seeking to deliver as fair as possible pay deals across public sector workforces. Public sector workers are already paid more on average in Scotland than they are in other parts of the UK.
Well, that is one of the areas where you do have power. You talked about the powers that are reserved to Westminster, but public sector wages is one area where you do have the power to make an impact and to raise some of the lowest paid workers in this country up to higher income at a time when inflation is hitting a 40-year high. So in the face of a number of ballots from public sector workers, why not address their demands for fair pay?
I think, as you know, if you can take a step back and think logically about that question, the money to pay for public sector pay deals comes from that effectively fixed budget that the Scottish Government operates within. That is largely set by decisions taken at Westminster, so that doesn't escape that hard reality. But secondly, and perhaps more importantly, we are already within that budget doing much more on public sector pay deals. So before we talk about pay deals in this financial year, because of the decisions we've taken in recent years, public sector workers, and I'm talking in general terms on average here, are already paid about 7% more than counterparts in other parts of the UK. If you look at the NHS, for example, the pay offer that has been made is higher than, in terms of the overall pay bill, than the one just made in the rest of the UK, or certainly in England earlier this week. So we are trying to maximise what we do there, as well as directing resource through the several benefits. I've mentioned the Scottish Child Payment. There are many other benefits that simply don't exist in other parts of the UK that are the means by which the Scottish Government is trying to get resources to those who need them most.
But you do have access to tax raising powers here in Scotland,
well,
so wouldn't you even consider using that for those in the higher end of the scale, 150,000 and above, for example?
I don't want to point out the obvious, but I'm going to have to do it. We've already used tax varying powers. We've already redesigned the income tax system in Scotland to cut tax for those at the bottom a little bit and to raise tax for those at the top. So we have a completely different structured income tax system in Scotland because we have used those tax varying powers.
But would you consider going further?
The point I'm saying is, and this has been talked about, debated, discussed through many years since we've had those powers, you don't raise very much money because of where the burden of income tax falls. You don't raise very much money by raising, for example, the top rate of tax. To raise significant amounts of money through income tax, and this is one of the problems, we have that one tax lever, and to raise significant amounts of money, it's the basic rate that would have to be increased. And of course, if you increase the basic rate of tax, you end up hitting the very people that you're trying to help.
I want to finish on mental health. Just under half of those we asked said that their mental health had been affected by this crisis. We're seeing more and more young people and children in particular being referred for treatment. What can the Scottish Government do in terms of providing more support, both for children and young people, but across the population as well?
Well, we are already doing a number of things, and they're all important. Firstly, increasing the amount of money that is invested in mental health. We have made commitments and are delivering those commitments to increase the resources. There are more people working in child and adolescent mental health services than I think there ever has been before. But secondly, and this is particularly relevant to children and adolescent services, we need to do much more to get help and support available much earlier when a young person is experiencing mental health problems, and on a much more preventative basis. So one of the key things we've done in recent times is give access to counselling support to every secondary school across the country, and ensuring greater access to wellbeing services in the community to try to reduce the pressure on specialist CAM services, but to make sure young people get access more quickly.
Okay, First Minister, thank you for speaking to us on STV News.